G'day everybody, John Madden here from Timbecon. In this video today, what we're going to do is show you how to make the plans and the templates to build a Les Paul Junior guitar. So we start with the drawings, we trace them out to make templates, and eventually what we can do is make a master template like this, which you can use to shape out the guitar body. You don't really need a lot of equipment, some good marking out gear, pencils, a texter, scissors, knife, tape, a couple of shaping tools like a couple of spoke shaves. You'll need either a good fret saw or a band saw and some sort of router. And that's everything you need to make a complete set of templates for this Les Paul. And see how we go. Okay, step one of making these templates is transferring this printed drawing onto some grease-proof paper that we can use to transfer onto MDF. First thing you do, get your grease-proof paper and cut it to size. I like going lengthways, like so, and you just want it to cut it. I mean, this is not high art or anything, but just cut it slightly oversized. So you've got enough paper to cover the drawing. We need a little bit more just to cover this element here. Cut it off. Lay it out like so. So you're covering the drawing, and put that little piece there as well. Now, using some blue tape, and I like blue tape because it's easy to put on, it's easy to take off. Yellow tape sticks too hard. Just tape the piece together. Don't obscure the lines of the outside, because what we're trying to do is capture the outside of the guitar body. And then tape the paper to the plans. And that's why blue tape's good, because when you want to take it off again, the plans won't tear. Okay. So now, take a good pencil. I'm using the Pica pencils. Not too sharp, because you don't want to cut through the thin paper. And just start the process of tracing around the exterior. Don't try to do one long line, because you'll just screw it up. Little short strokes, as accurately as possible, just covering the dark line of the exterior. It doesn't matter if you're a little bit rough, as long as the main flow of the line is accurate, you're good. You can see how I'm constantly stretching that paper out, just so I get a really nice view of the line. With the drawing traced out, I'll just take it off gently. Don't want to tear anything. Okay, so there's our drawing. So there's two ways you can do this. You can either take a piece of MDF, this is 3mm MDF approximately, and you can tape this straight to the MDF and cut round that quite easily. It's a little bit hit and miss, that technique, because there's no room for error. What I prefer to do is cut this shape out, then stick that down on the MDF, trace out the shape, and then cut it out on the bandsaw. Okay, so now that I've demonstrated the worst cutting out of a paper template in history, it doesn't really matter that as long as the general shape is good, because when we transfer this shape to the MDF, we're still working in approximations here. So slightly oversized, because we can use our shaping tools to bring it back to the line. Tape the cutout, doesn't need big pieces, down to the piece of MDF. That's just to keep it in position while we're working on it. And using a marker, mark around this edge so we can define the shape. Take off the tape and finish up these cuts. So now you can see the outline of the guitar defined on the MDF. Now to cut it out. And when we cut it out, we just cut it out slightly oversized. We always shape it back to create the perfect shape. Okay, now we've got our piece of MDF cut to shape off the bandsaw. We want to shape this using our hand tools and a sander if you've got one, to really cut down and refine the shape of the template to match that of the drawing. So pop it in a vise, and this is kind of the fun part, and start shaping. Always keep an eye on the shape as you're working the surface or the edges, just so you don't create too many flat spots, because they're hard to get out later. I've got one right here, so we'll work on that. Now, some of you might be asking or thinking to yourself, why, if John's going to create a 9mm template right from the start, why wouldn't I just do all of this process straight to the 9mm MDF? By shaping out the thinner MDF first, it's so much easier to shape rather than trying to keep this surface of a 9mm perfectly flat and square to the surface. I go with the narrow 3mm first and then transfer that across. Much easier to do. Okay, you can see how the process is working. Let's jump to one that we made previously just to save a little bit of time here in the studio. So with a bit of persistence, edge sanding process after shaping using the spoke shapes, you can come up with a really lovely looking template. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day whether it's exactly to the millimetre the size of the original drawing. I think that that's close enough. Just sharpening up my little Pica pencil here, very handy. So we've got a nice sharp point to mark out around our template onto the 9mm piece of MDF. So just hold it in place, easy as it goes. Mark around the outside. So we have a nice refined shape on this 9mm MDF. So what we can do now is take that back to the bandsaw and cut out this shape. Let's do that now. Okay, so I've cut this out on the bandsaw, this 9mm section of MDF. Now you might have noticed that my cut is pretty rough and fast. It doesn't matter, because what we're going to do is use our thin 3mm section as a guide, attach these to each other, and then go around on the router to make that shape perfectly in tune with the original pattern that we made. Now, why would we do any of this is probably what you're asking. Again, like I said before, we use the thin MDF to shape and refine the shape of the template because it's easy to work using hand tools and a sander. But when we want to make a template to machine with, when we're actually cutting the wooden body of the instrument itself, we want a nice thick template that the router bit bearing can follow easily. These thin sections of MDF are a little bit tricky when you're using a bearing on a router. So make the original and you can store that for future reference. Today we're going to use it to make our working template, which we use to actually make the thing that we're building. All right, so There's lots of ways to attach things together. I'm going to use a nail because it just needs to be pinned in position in a few locations. You can build an elaborate jig if you've got the time and the energy. But as I intend to only do this once, I'm just going to pin it together using these little brad nails. And don't underestimate the value of these lovely Japanese hammers. Fantastic. So there you go, tacked together. Let's get on the router table. Okay, we have our router table here. Now if you come in close, you can see this pattern making bit that we're using. So you've got a rolling bearing and the blades below it. And what I'm going to do is set this up using the height adjustment. You can wind that down with that blade intersects with that. There's not a lot of margin there, so we've got to make sure we get it right. This is the nice advantage of these windy up tables, is it's very easy to make accurate changes to the depth of cut. So that looks about right. We pop in our throat plate, one way or another. Check that, looks fine. Let's have a go. Perfect. The beauty of routers. Okay, take the little nails out. And there we have our 9mm machining template. Okay, our 9mm master template is a very beautiful thing because what we can actually do with this basic plate is build the two critical templates we need to be able to produce our Les Paul Junior perfectly the first time, but also you can build multiples of the same guitar using the same templates. So these are the ones I've made previously. This is my big machining template, which has got screw holes, so you can screw it to the wooden blank that you're cutting the guitar body out of. So you make one version for that, and if you're really clever, or you've got nothing better to do, make a second version, which has all the component cutouts as well. Having the two versions together gives you a complete set so you can quickly make a guitar body without having to really think about it. Now, positioning the cutouts for the hardware is pretty critical. So take your original template back to the drawing, and you'll notice through the drawing there's a center line that's drawn on the template, actually on the drawings. If you position your guitar template on there, and this is a pretty good match, take a pencil. I'll just sharpen my pica for a moment, and just mark that center line position there, and on the other end as well. And we need a big ruler, so I'm going to go get one. Big ruler. We can draw a center line right through the template and use that as a reference point to mark out the corresponding positions of the cutouts. What we can do then is start to draw in on this main template the positions of the various cutouts. We've got three. One for the neck, where the neck slots in, the pickup section where the pickup's embedded into the face of the guitar, and this cutout here which is actually where the electronics and the switching goes. Just a note to self, when you're getting to the place where you're going to machine these into your wooden blank that you spent an hour or two building, make sure you put them on the right side. You don't want to end up sort of going all Jimi Hendrix on yourself and making the guitar around the wrong way. So note to self. Now, marking out the positions of that's pretty easy, and you've got to do it reasonably accurately. So I suggest using a nice ruler, pair of calipers, and you can go about and mark out the positions of these various cutouts. All the information you need to know to transfer onto your template for the cutouts is written on the drawings to the 0.1 of a mil. So go ahead and do that, and then you'll have a very clear picture of how the guitar is going to be put together. Now you've marked out all the positions of the various components. How do you cut these holes through the template? Well, this is a good question. There's probably two ways. You could cut directly into the template, then use a file and a bunch of other stuff to make perfectly neat cutouts. But if you screw it up, you have to make this again. So I wouldn't recommend that. The best way, in my humble opinion, is to build a template for the cutout. So you can build a series of these little templates. One for the electronics, one for the hardware at the back, and one for the pickup cutout. These aren't hard to make. Machine yourself two sections of MDF that match the width of the pickup cutout, set them to the length of the pickup cutout, and then simply glue two cheeks onto the either side of these little cutouts, and you'll make a secondary template that's the perfect shape for the pickup cutout. The beautiful thing about these is that you can write the instructions, pickup cutout, 10 millimeters deep. So when you slap it on later, you don't have to go back to the original drawings. This one, for example, has got a whole bunch of hieroglyphics on it that tells you exactly how to use it. But the beautiful thing about it is because you've joined it together, as opposed to try to cut it out, you know that you can make it very accurately, very easily, and then clamp that onto your template, into position, drill a hole and cut it out. And once you've done the first one, just repeat in the other sections, and it'll be perfect, easy. Do that 3 times and you create this master template. Now, some of you may have noticed there is a slight difference between these templates, apart from the cutouts, obviously. But this one here hasn't had the fingerboard relieved, whereas position for the fingerboard, as where the cutout on this one is in position. This one is strictly for, and I have a working example, cutting the shape of the guitar, including the cutout. If you were to cut along this line here, it's like so, and then try to use this shape here by pinning it to the job and running a router through there, if you attempted to do that with that flimsy little piece of MDF of about 8 millimeters, that's going to wobble around and probably break off. Yeah? So what we do is leave this section of MDF here in position. So when I apply that to my block of wood, and which I've done earlier, was machine that section out, there's no vibration possible, so you'll get a nice clean cut without it self-destructing. You could even go, depending on the material, this is mahogany, so it's very stable. If the material was more delicate, you could even leave this whole cutout till later and do that as a secondary process rather than just machining around the whole piece in one go. That's up to you. End of stage one is to build this section of the guitar, the template body. Perfectly matched to the drawings, perfectly positioned, cutout positions, all cut ready for you just to slap on the wood and route out as you go. Stay tuned for video 2, where we will actually work on the guitar further, do these remaining cutouts and start building the neck. Don't forget to subscribe to Timbecon's channel. I'm John Madden. See you soon.